I beat you. You're still on mute.
Hi, Ken.
How are you?
Good. Were you waiting in the waiting room?
No.
Okay, good.
There was no waiting room. I came right straight in. How have you been?
Doing good. There might be a little background noise.
I heard.
Bedtime over here, so I'm going to go back on mute. Hello, Kate. How are you?
Hi, Ken. Just fine. All well in the neighborhood.
Yes, long time no talk.
Yeah. Yeah, busy time.
That it is.
Hey, Ken, congratulations on Aurora.
Thank you. She seems very happy and excited about the decision, so that's good.
You know that Bob Nadeau's son went to Mercer.
No, I didn't know that.
Yes. Yep.
How long ago would that have been?
That would have been probably within the last 10 years. So.
Yeah. And how did he end up at Mercer, I wonder?
I don't remember what the deal was,
Yeah.
but I remember Bob was always wearing the paraphernalia, and it was very much resembled Maynard's because it had the M, and the colors I think were orange and black. And
yeah, the colors are orange and black. So
yeah, so
unfortunately, it's the Mercer Bears. Otherwise, it would all work. You know,
yeah,
it would have the M and the orange and the black. Yeah, but she's happy. I mean, you know, we walked on campus. It was everything that. Well, I'm sure you've seen it with your daughter at Providence. So.
Yeah, she found her home, and
that's everything that you want, right?
Exactly. That is it. I can't.
John, how are you?
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
I think we're going to see a bunch of people we don't normally see tonight.
Well, it's a joint meeting.
Josh is on, Natalie's on. Hey, Natalie.
Hello.
Oh, I need to rename myself. Everybody's going to see my, let's see here. There we go. Rather than seeing what department I am in at work, you know, this will work better.
Well, there's a face I haven't seen in a while. Marius, how are you?
Hi, David. How are you?
Good, thank you. Haven't seen you in quite some time.
I'm around.
I know you are. I know you are.
Thank you, Verizon Wireless. Please hold while your call.
How you doing, Marius?
I'm okay. How are you, Ken?
Good. Congratulations to your wife for throwing her papers in. Was glad to see that.
I do not approve, just so that you know. I support her. I support her fully, but I do not approve.
Yeah. Well,
it's gonna mean I'm gonna have to do a lot of cooking if she wins, and
well, that you should be doing that already. I mean,
I'm gonna mute you right now.
There should be no change whatsoever between before and after.
Oh, I have it really good right now, so I'm a little bit worried if she wins.
I'm sure she'll be a great addition to the school committee.
Well, she's excited. She's
Yeah,
excited.
well, I was excited too. Somebody was asking me, I said, I just remember having chats with her on 129 Parker many moons ago, and she always had good questions and had done her homework. So I always appreciated that about her.
Well, I appreciate what you guys are doing. You've been on all these committees, and David has been on a selectman for all these years, and it's a benevolent job, and it's long hours and many meetings, and thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
for, the comment.
once you're on the select board that long, you become the elder statesman.
It's awesome that you guys can do it. Thank you again.
When I started, I had a head of hair.
Yeah.
Hey, Jason.
Hey, Greg, how are you?
Hey, good. It's still me, everyone. I know I look the same usually for the last year and a half. The same suit and tie is still behind the door. If anyone needs me to put it on.
You're still in the garage?
Basement. I've been in the basement.
Oh, okay.
Same basement.
Oh. Um, okay. Okay.
Don't forget, Mike. Get out the date. I've never forgotten our anniversary. At least not until tonight. Do you need paper, pencil?
I got 7 o'clock, but we're going to give it a couple more minutes.
Hey, you have their photos, right? Your friends?
His wife.
All right, there's a lot of people on, so maybe we should get going. A lot of people. This is a huge meeting, and so let's go through introductions. I'm Greg Johnson. I'm the town administrator. If we've not met, I don't know how. Like I feel like I've met most people in town over the last almost 3 years. I've been in the position. But thank you so much for your time and thanks for your cooperation. We're not going to introduce everybody because there's a lot of committees. I'll just name a couple other key people. Beth Greenblatt, I can see her on my little block on my screen. She's our, hey Beth. She's a consultant that has been contracted to work with the town for a long time now, many months, and she's been holding our hand through this process the whole way. And she has a wealth of knowledge and experience. She's done many solar projects like this for many years, and so she's been instrumental in our progress and our development of where we've gotten so far. Beth, can you say hi so everyone kind of see you?
Greetings, folks. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Beth. I'm just looking around my screens. Justin DeMarco has also been instrumental in this, but I don't see him. Justin, can you hear me if you say hi? Not yet. All right, well, we'll get to him in a minute. So just want to say thank you for your time. To give a little bit of context of where we are and why we're here right now. This is not exactly ideal. This isn't how I envisioned the project being rolled out, admittedly. And we had been working on the project for months, had a RFP that was developed with the RFP development team that was awarded to this vendor called SunPower. I'm just greatly watering down what I've already said in the emails that you guys have already seen. And when the project got to a certain level and it was introduced to the school committee and then following to the board, to the select board, there was a lot of questions that had come up. So a couple of meetings later, the school committee had requested information be submitted to the school committee for their consideration whether to endorse the project or not. They identified in this list of questions that they had a number of committees, which are represented this evening as I posted this meeting for, to provide the school committee statements, which are spelled out in those documents, which I also included in the email. So instead of having Justin, myself, or Beth go to 6 different meetings, I figure for the sake of efficiency and for a certain amount of timeliness, I would have this meeting. So my expectations are not necessarily that you provide a statement this evening, of course not. In fact, all I'm doing is facilitating the answers to the inquiries from the school committee. So if you submit me anything, I will forward it to the superintendent's office and then they will forward it presumably to the school committee. I am only hosting this to facilitate that correspondence. But we are open to questions. I really hope that everyone reviewed as much as they could the great volume of materials that were already presented, whether in the attachments or in the multiple meetings. You could watch them online even. But if you have any questions beyond that, of course, I am trying to facilitate the answers or those statements that the school committee requested. So I ask for everyone's patience and thank you for your cooperation, and I hope everyone's civil. I also don't want to be here all night. I don't think anyone does. We've talked about this for a long time. I don't want to necessarily put like a time stamp on this. I didn't do it in the agenda, but we'll see how it goes. So thank you so much. Justin, are you on yet?
I am. Thank you. Sorry for the delay, guys.
That's all
How's
right.
everybody doing tonight?
Well, there's a lot of people, Justin.
Yeah, you can not. Everybody can see each other. This is great. This is actually a great community experience. So I kind of missed how Greg started, but I'm assuming he wants a little bit of a general overview of the process that has taken place thus far and what has led to where we are today.
I said a little bit about that, Justin. Hold on. So let me introduce. This is Justin DeMarco. He's the director of public works, and he and Beth Greenblatt have been like attached to the hip during this process for many months. Justin, what I don't want to do actually is to rehash it at a great extent what's already been presented. So like that was not my intentions. I gave a little bit of context as to why we're here, and maybe I'll even speak a little bit more to that. If I'm trying to facilitate deliberation by the school committee per their request and their inquiries, I reached out to the superintendent's office, asked when the next school committee meeting was, with no assumption, but with the possibility that it might be listed on that agenda to deliberate on this project. And that's for May 6th, I believe, is the next regularly scheduled school committee meeting. So I asked the superintendent's office when they may need materials to provide to the school committee for information for that meeting. I was told, ideally by Friday, which is in 2 days from now. So I backdated to this date, and that's why we're here tonight. Just procedural. All right, so that was my background. So what I would like to do is, if you have specific questions, ask now. But again, I'm trying to facilitate the request of the school committee to provide those statements. So now I'm opening it up. You can ask a question to me. You can ask Justin, Beth, anybody. How can I help? And when you speak, just say your name and what committee you're with, so that I can take some notes, please.
I'll go first if nobody else is. So I'm Peter Campbell. I'm with the Finance Committee. We had looked at this with last spring's town meeting, made a recommendation for the article. I don't know if we missed something. When we made our recommendation, it talked about rooftops and parking lots, and we didn't know Green Meadow Field was included. So I guess my question is, when did Green Meadow Field get included? How integral is it? I don't feel like the town has had a fair chance to evaluate whether we're willing to give up a field for a solar panel installation. So I think that's the crux of and from my sense of our FinCom meeting, most of FinCom anyway. So to delve straight to the issue, I think that's our big issue. So I don't know who can address that, but
Peter, I can address that. So if you look at the motion, I can't speak for the FinCon comments, but if you look at the motion included every parcel within the school district. It called out Green Meadow, Fowler, the high school, and alumni field. The portfolio was always part of the RFP to allow what is called a portfolio of solar projects: ground mount, canopy mount, and rooftop mounts. If you refer to the RFP, you will see that there is a map location identifying potential areas for proposers to come and actually provide their proposals based within the criteria that is set forth. And Green Meadows Field was indicated within that, as were several other areas. And as we went through the RFP criteria selection team went through the RFP process, there was some areas that the two finalists did not pursue, and one of them was actually between the area of Fowler and the high school, which is a major wetland resource area, and Alumni Field just would not fall into their criteria. That is what's led us to the rooftop at the high school, the canopies at the high school, the canopies at the Fowler Field, and the ground mount behind the Green Meadow. I think the second part of your question on that, Peter, was does the ground mount make this project viable? Is that what the crux of that question was?
No, more, I don't think the town, or myself as a member of the town, has had adequate time or information to evaluate whether we would give up Green Meadow Field for whatever solar project. And I don't think that question has been put to us. I don't think we've had a chance to say, yes, that's what we want to do. So, based on that, I think there's a problem with this. So that's what you got to address, I guess. I mean, I certainly don't have enough information, or don't think there'll be enough information on this meeting to say, oh, yes, we should give up a field. I mean, I know from my time on soccer that fields are quite precious in Maynard. And I don't think this is a question that was asked of the town. And so I'm having trouble seeing how we can go forward.
So this is Ken Estabrook. So I serve with Peter on the Finance Committee. And since we met the other night and had a discussion on this, I just want to build on what he said. So there are two articles at last summer's annual town meeting that dealt with this. And in the discussions that we had, according to our collective recollections, the discussion was about about rooftops and parking lots. Now, I think that may have come from the fact that the original proposal was along those lines, and maybe there was an assumption along that. But the timing of that was that we were writing up those recommendations in mid-May, about the same time. Actually, it was the beginning of May, just before the RFP went out. Of course, when the RFP went out, Justin, as you well know, the map that went out with that, I did identify that rear field. I'm guessing that there were a few people across the town who happened to look at that, and we're probably relying on the Finance Committee's description of the implications of a yes vote, of what passage of these would be. And so when people would read our recommendation, and I do believe the sponsor's comment also spoke very generally and didn't talk about the Green Meadow Field, but I'm just guessing that most people went into this thinking that, and not realizing that a field was a part of that RFP. And so I think Peter's question goes to sort of the original school committee proposal, moving to a more specific proposal in May of last year. And just for context, I'd remind everybody that in April, May of last year, everybody was very busy responding to the COVID pandemic. So that's town staff, the select board, the finance committee, the school committee, everyone in town government was very busy focused on responding to that. I think what Peter's question, and if it isn't, I think what Peter's question is coming from is the finance committee's desire to understand how that field came into be part of the project.
So Ken, that's kind of why the motion was put in play, to allow flexibility throughout the school district. Like I said, I can't necessarily speak to the sponsor comments, but I did have a large conversation with the liaison from the FinCom, which was Tom Black, about the portfolio. How that transpires, we don't necessarily get to review the FinCom sponsor comments, after to adjust them. And that might have been a little bit of the lapse. And you're not wrong. The RFP is after, but the motion was before, and the motion's presented to the select board. And as you heard me say before, the motion included Green Meadow, Fowler, High School, Alumni Field, because those are the parcels that need to be legally identified.
So I understand it was the entire school parcel. I get that. And I think we all understand that if you read the article, the way it was proposed, it said that. But what I think Peter's question gets at, and I'll ask it very explicitly, is at what point did the Green Meadow Field come under consideration? Clearly, it was under consideration in the RFP, but I think we're just trying to get a sense of when that field was under consideration. Because I think from the reaction of the community as a whole, and Peter alluded to this, I don't think the community realized until fairly recently that the field was included in that. And so I'm just asking the question, when did our attention turn from just rooftops and parking lots to starting to take a look at the Green Meadow Field?
Since the inception of the request from the school committee to maximize revenue sources for solar based on the technical assistance grant. So the entire district, school district, which is the campus, was identified for potential areas for solar.
So that was previous to the RFP, obviously.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Okay, so
that's why the motion, that's why the motion calls
Right.
out the general idea of the campus.
And I get that. I mean, we're trying to maximize revenue into the town, and that's a good thing. So can you give a sort of an approximate, time period, date, when the Green Meadow Field started to be discussed? That was obviously previous to May.
Yeah, so when we initiated the motion or the control at the time for both solar, which was the middle of April, and then it was vetted through legal counsel and produced to the select board roughly in that time frame. And then the select board, as you know, go through their process with controls. And as they approve them, they go to FinCom next and so forth, and subsequently to town meeting.
And just
So
just for
motion was
everybody's
granted in April.
education, that is in about the March, April timeframe, somewhere in that, because it was clearly, I remember us having discussions on the draft control in late April. So it would have been March or April.
Yeah, so February at the TA recommended budget is when the school committee presented the idea for solar on the revenue, for their revenue presentation for their upcoming FY21 budget. At that point is when we were tasked with executing what was a potential solar project. Within that time frame, a portfolio was put together, an idea within the school district, which was the map. The map is specific to RFP because of statute, but the motion was created prior to that with the assumption that all of the school campus would be reviewed for the potential for solar. And at that time, it was prior to the RFP, prior to FinCon's comment, that area was identified as a potential space for a ground mount unit.
All right, thank you.
Jack McKean, Historical Commission. My question has nothing to do with the Historical Commission. It is really a request. Could I get a very brief set of comments on what is the field used for today and what is the percent of time that it is utilized?
So I can also answer that. So right now, the Green Meadow Field, the field behind Green Meadow School, is technically not standardized for any athletic use. What it is utilized for is youth peewee football's practice only, which is very marginal, very seasonal, and it is not, the field is not actually, it is kind of very subpar in a potential dangerous field to continue to allow sports on. As some of you may or may not have been there, it is a dirt bowl. It is very compact and very unsafe, and it is minimally maintained. But the use is specific to peewee football and their practice schedule. I do know that with the Fowler Fields renovation, that some of the baseball teams at the high school utilized it as a practice field, but that was during the entire renovation process of the Fowler Field. The Fowler Field has now been completed, which is allowed and expanded use of potential soccer, could house Pee Wee football, could even house potential practice sites if needed. But I actually do not believe it's needed. Crow Park is underutilized. So if you look at this, there's a transition that goes from park to park, but
Thank you.
that's what I have.
Thank you.
I just like to chip in there. It's used for a lot more things than that. It's used for Boys and Girls Club soccer. It's definitely used for the field day that the Green Meadow does behind the school. That's where they have it. Just even in terms of grammar here, we're not trying to utilize it. We are trying to use it. We're not trying to turn it into utility. The people here, we don't want to utilize it and turn it into an electrical utility.
Can you, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you say who you are and what committee you're with?
I'm Ned Green. I'm a soccer coach here in Maynard on the Green Committee. I'm a little bit more of a wind turbine guy. I've helped design some wind turbine stuff, but so solar's a little not really my forte, but it's where my background is. I've got children in 3rd grade and 1st grade. They use that field all the time after school and stuff like that. It's got bleachers in there. It's got some nice grass. People ride their bikes on it. It's used every day. And it is something that we're really trying to preserve as a town, as an open space. Is used, I mean, essentially every day. So I don't know where Justin gets this. I recommend maybe you visit it and talk to the town about it. It doesn't seem like you talk to the Boys and Girls Club about it, or
so Mr. Green, Mr. Green, can I interrupt? Excuse me, can I interrupt?
Yeah.
I am kind of playing moderator in this. I am trying to keep this opinions relatively minimal, frankly, because I'm trying to provide information to
okay.
You know, I'm trying to get statements. So, and I am focusing on the committees. So I'm not trying to be disrespectful, Mr. Green. I'm only trying to say of those committees listed, I'm trying to focus on that. But you make a good point, and I'm glad you got it out.
I mean, I'll come from the Green Maynard, the people that are orchestrating, trying to get green stuff here in the Maynard town of Maynard. I'm on board for the solar panels, and I think that maybe Green Meadow should be included. Maybe a parking lot in Crow Fields and stuff, but maybe someone else can chip in here and talk about how often the field behind there is used and how much it's used and that type of stuff. So I can be quiet, but I don't feel like we can just leave it at Mr. DeMarco's word there.
So I will chip in. My name is John Brennan. I'm with the Rec Commission. Just a point of clarification, Boys and Girls Club does not use that backfield for soccer. We use the Crow Park outfield.
Not when my son was playing. Sorry, actually that's incorrect, sir.
So again, I'm trying to thank you, John, but thank you, Ned. I am trying to stick to the topics that were presented by the school committee. I'm not, and so this is fine. This is good. This is fine. I'm just let's not go too much back and forth. Let's just try to kind of stick to. Yeah. So there was a couple of digital hands raised, but Peter, I can see you now. But I saw Bill Crenshaw's, and I'm not an expert at Zoom. Don't think that I'm really doing a great. So, but I saw Bill Crenshaw's. I saw Natalie Robert with their digital hand. So, Bill, would you like to, Crenshaw? I don't see you on my little box here. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering about the consideration of design of the solar on the parking lots, because I know they were doing standard canopies, but a lot of people now are covering the entire parking footprint with a solar structure. And so they get much more number of solar panels, obviously, because they're covering the drive aisles as well as the parking stalls. So was that ever figured out in the process of whether they could get extra coverage by doing that instead?
Yeah, Bill, I can answer that. The criteria selection team visualized that and reviewed that extensively. And the canopies presented through the vendor now are a cantilever butterfly system that maximizes solar production on a minimal footprint. And the other developer was reviewed, which was looking to maximize a larger area which would have created stormwater issues and potentially created visual aesthetic issues that the criteria selection team reviewed, and also created snow load issues and potential displacement of snow in areas that were vital for bus loop turnarounds, et cetera. It was vetted through the criteria selection team.
Ms. Roberts, Natalie, I don't see you on my little screen here, but if you have a question, you can speak.
I mean, my question was pretty much addressed. I just had the same questions about the use of the field. And my concern is that I have a feeling that maybe T-ball is the only one who officially uses it, but it seems like a lot of other people use it casually, right? We've talked about this in other committees, that there are sanctioned uses. You know, you call the town, you say, I want to reserve it on Thursdays from 4 to 5 p.m. But then there's all the other people. And I think that's the mismatch here, is that a lot of people seem to use it for casual use. And the question is, will our other playing fields have space? I mean, presumably I reviewed a lot of the information, but I'm sure I missed things. But when you were looking at all the possible school space, the other official school fields that are more maintained were considered, but obviously if they're well maintained and if they're used for organized sports on a more regimented schedule, you're not going to want to use that space, right? So the question is, will those spaces have room for pickup games, for casual practices, that sort of stuff? Because that is, I mean, those are important things, but the problem is nobody's keeping track of what that is exactly, right? So
we, Natalie, I can answer that too. So the idea of that is capacity. Do we as a town of Maynard have capacity for athletic field use and casual park use? The premise of what is open space and recreation. I've dealt with the rec commission, the superintendent's office. Just to give you a general overview of how this works, is the athletic fields in the school department are under the supervision and control of the superintendent's office, and the DPW is the responsible party for maintenance, as we are there cutting grass, trimming, and providing cultural services. And then the rec committee is also involved with use. We've had a number of conversations about maximizing athletic field use, maintaining our athletic fields to a standard that is acceptable and safe to our youth within the community. And at the same time, as I am maintaining school athletic fields, the DPW is also responsible for all park fields. So that includes Rio, Rockland Ave, Coolidge School, etc. A lot of our parks from a official permitting standpoint are underutilized. And if you go to what Ned talks about from a casual use, some areas are used casually more than others. Some take precedence more than others. But we can do a better job centralizing the use of our fields. And as the maintenance individuals that are constantly on those fields at all different hours throughout the week, there's not as much casual use as you would assume that is at a capacity issue. It could be refocused. We are not at the point where we can't fulfill permits because of the use of certain fields. We do try to maximize each field for its design purpose, and sometimes there's some overlap in that. That is a maintenance issue, and that is an identified issue. What I've always said to both the rec committee and the superintendent's office is we need to maximize what is our limited resource, which is operating budget to maintain these fields properly, and utilize it on our most priority fields. Because right now our budget doesn't match our capacity. So that's when you heard me say that the area behind Green Meadow is almost a non-playable surface, is because I am on that field quite often. And it is something that there's a reason it's not permitted quite often. It's not standard size for any athletic field use. And it is one of the worst areas within the community from a maintenance standpoint. There is barely utility grass on it. So that's why that was identified highly as the least impactful on an undisturbed location. Now, you know, as this is part of this exercise, and we do want to hear stakeholders' foresight on this and understand the constraints that some of you may have with this site. So please continue to ask questions.
So I saw Peter Campbell like physically raise his hand. Do you have a question, Peter?
Yes.
And
I
Sarah
was
Donnelly,
wondering
I see
if-
your hand raised, so I'll get to you next.
I was wondering if there was someone on from the Green Meadow School Building Committee and if there's thoughts from them about, putting this next to the school and any concerns about that. And
So Justin and I are both on the, did you say the Green Meadow Building Committee or the Green Meadow School Committee?
Whatever the committee is that's dealing with the, MSBA and the rehab or redo of the Green Meadow School.
Right, so the Building Committee. Okay.
Yes.
So Justin and I are both on that. And your question was, has that been in consideration, like the potential MSBA or the project's impacts to this? Was that your question?
Yeah, is there a concern from the committee about the impact of, kind of the permanent solar installation, what seems to be pretty close to the school, and is that going to impact our options for Green Meadow?
So that I don't, unless I'm recalling wrong, so I'm going to look at you, Justin, or anyone else on this call that's a member of this committee. I don't believe that point has been deliberated by the committee. But the superintendent's office had said at a prior public meeting that they had contacted the MSBA to ask the potential impacts from a solar array onto what could be, will be engaging with the MSBA for a feasibility project, which will inform the potential site developments for a Green Meadow Elementary School or whatever form that may take. And my recollection from the superintendent's office was that the MSBA was very positive in their response that is a good thing, that it's encouraging that the school committee, the school district is looking for energy efficiency purposes and solar projects that could be tied into a future project. The feasibility study has not yet begun. So this could be a topic for a future Green Meadow School Building Committee agenda, but as of right now, I don't believe that they have weighed in.
I can add some insight to that too. During the vetting out process, the #1 priority of the selection criteria committee and the identification of RFPs was the MSBA process. That was #1. That is actually why we are not allowing a proposer to put roof mounted units on the Fowler School. That is why the Green Meadow roof was not identified either. That is why the Green Meadow area was not identified as a carport, accessory solar location, to maximize the flexibility within what could be a repair, addition, or a new construction process. I will tell you that with Governor Baker's new standards for net zero public facilities standards moving forward for 2050's goals, connecting newer facilities in an efficient manner and interconnecting with green energy, whether it be wind, solar, hydro, etc., is highly sought after. There is the potential to trigger 2% increases from reimbursement through MSBA, which could be substantial revenue source for the new construction for the community. And this is a great question because our consultant, Beth Greenblatt, who represents the town of Maynard throughout this process, also represents the town of Lincoln, who is currently going through a new school building process and an interconnection to a solar project that they're working on. Beth, do you mind weighing in on this?
Sure. So I'm supporting the Lincoln Public Schools, and they're building a massive, it's not new construction for all intent and purpose it is, it's massive rehab. And as part of that, their objective as approved and required by town meeting was to reimagine this building as a zero net energy building supported by renewable generation. So as part and parcel of this overall project, there is 2 things going on. There's the construction of the new building while simultaneously working with a third party who is going to own and operate a solar array that's a rooftop and a canopy. Unfortunately, Lincoln Public Schools did not have the real estate available for a ground mount. It's a little challenging when you do two types of projects like this together. They have different timeframes and different requirements. One is owned by the public entity, the other is owned by a third party. And so as Justin mentioned, when we put together the procurement, went out to bid, this was a pretty significant conversation about how do we deal with a solar project that might happen today and later need to be integrated into a new building. And the answer is once it's done, it's literally unplugging it and plugging it in. It's in as simple as terms. There are some other equipment requirements, but you basically have your renewable asset in place and known, the design is known, the size is known, and can be fully integrated into a new building that's going to be constructed.
So what Beth is talking about is during the design phase. So if the feasibility study for the MSBA process identifies new construction as the prime route and a new building is designed, throughout the design phase, it's easier and potentially cheaper to design the building to take on what would be green energy, which is electric. So then you would design your mechanical systems around what is the known production, thus eliminating the use of fossil fuels, gas resources, oil, etc. So there is an advantageous approach to having green renewable energy in relation to an MSBA and a brand new school. It is highly sought after by the governor's office in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, as they have set those goals for net zero energy efficient public facilities for 2050. That's not just new buildings. They want to pump money into existing facilities across the Commonwealth to try to eliminate what is emissions at a large scale produced by public entities.
All right, Sarah Donnelly, yeah, I got you next. Can you introduce yourself and what committee you're on? Right.
Hi, I'm Sarah Donnelly. I don't know if any of my committees are pertinent to this meeting, but my question actually was partly asked by Peter Campbell, and that was how the new school for Green Meadow fits into all this. And then Beth kind of addressed some of that, obviously. And I think my question still is the timeline. So with going through the process of the new school building, how does that fit into the timeline of the solar panel, potential solar panel installation? And is there ways to incorporate them to both happen, but not in that field? So like utilizing the new roof of the school building, or are the timelines off? And then I think my second question is, where are we at in terms of like how this moves forward? I wasn't in town for the town meeting, and this is all sort of news to me, but now that the town has voted or made the vote to go through with the RFP is what I'm assuming happened. And if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But where does constituent opinions and perspectives on this happening fit into the timeline of what goes forward? And where do we get to like weigh in our opinion going forward with the project?
Again, I'll answer the second part first, and then we'll go back to the other part. So to summarize the articles in one way, is that the authorization to negotiate for this project was to the select board. It was sort of like offered, allow for the select board to negotiate this project. But with the understanding that it would also be contingent upon the school committee's endorsement of this project, which frankly should have happened before town meeting. It didn't. But the select board, so legally we should still have the school committee's endorsement, but conceptually the select board would not want any project that the school committee wouldn't want to move forward with. This is something the select board has already said publicly, and so it's true. So even this meeting this evening is to facilitate the school committee's deliberation as to whether to endorse this project or not. As far along the way, there could have been public input whenever, at any point, supposedly, like there could have been public input when just a general inquiry into the over the course of the couple of months. There was a member of the select board and a representative from the school committee on the RFP development and evaluation team, which in theory does give some public input, which would then be reported back to those representative boards for the deliberation of the greater body. And if at any point either of those bodies, requested a more public forum, whether it be this sort of fashion or otherwise, of course, that could be at the discretion of those bodies. And I think they would welcome. I assume that they would welcome that sort of input, as is the case even this evening. So I don't think there was any sort of descriptive. Now is when we're going to have a public hearing, if you will, or a public forum to this degree. I don't think that was an expectation necessarily, or at least that's not my recollection, as has been the guidance from those committees. But at any point they could have used that. They could have sort of exercised that to get a broader. So my understanding was it was not going to go back to town meeting necessarily, if that's kind of what you're presuming, because town meeting already allowed the select board to negotiate for this project. So very good. So your first question was a little more technical about the timing and how it kind of plays into the new school. I'm not sure, Justin, could you speak to that? I know we've kind of alluded to it already, but go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, so the MSBA process, we have a rough timeline of over 2 years before completion. The feasibility study is a large research project that will take some time. The design will happen within that time frame, and then procurement and construction, which is there's a large gap before you see what may be a new addition or repair to the Green Meadow School. The solar project, as it is now, was awarded based off of the proposals that you see forth in front of you. 3 of the 4 applications have been approved through the SMART program, which is the incentive program through the state and the public utility, which is Eversource in this factor. If this committee or this group is saying, can we remove the ground mount? How do we incorporate that into the new building? There's a lot of procurement aspects that will have to necessarily go into that. We can't necessarily use the same vendor. We awarded this proposal under the concept and inception of what was presented. So if there was a lot of consensus from the community that eliminate the ground mount, if at the end of the day this group gets together and the select board and the school committee believe, and I don't want to speak for them, but speaking with them a lot, if there's consensus that the community of Maynard does not want to move forward with the ground mount of Green Meadow, then our team would go back to the developer and request that they remove that. They will then change their proposal. And if the energy production of that ground mount significantly changes the economic impact from the developer who has to upfront the capital to build these projects, there's also the potential revenue change to the town. So technically right now, I'm not sure how much information, but the idea behind this proposal is that the town of Maynard would receive roughly $70,000 per year for the next 20 years, equates to $1.4 million. Obviously, if you change the production value, then that economic will change. So there will be a hinge point where the juice isn't worth the squeeze. And that's kind of why we are here right now in this group. And I think Sarah, I don't want to speak for the selectmen at the select board or the school committee, but I believe this is a good time to voice your opinion. This is where your voice will be heard the most.
All right, so next, and I apologize if I'm doing this out of order, but it looks like Lydia Clancy had her hand up, but maybe she doesn't anymore. Lydia would do you want to?
I was just going to say, when you said other members of the Green Meadow MSBA committee, I was just going to chime in if necessary because I'm on the committee. That's all.
Okay. Okay, so I saw Marius Alboda. Now I've lost you on my screen. Marius Alboda, do you want to introduce yourself? What committees you may be on, and what question you have?
Sorry, I'm not on any committee. I'm just a citizen taxpayer, and wasn't sure if I was allowed to speak or say anything. So if it's okay.
Yeah, go. You're talking now. Go ahead.
Oh, awesome. Okay. Well, I would just want to echo what Ken and Peter Campbell said earlier in the beginning. Is I really feel that the town hasn't really had enough time to consider this. And of course, I'm all pro green energy and all that, but it really seems like we have such little green space in this town, and we haven't really yet figured out what we're going to do with the schools. And I know, the school committee is struggling with that. And to give up this parcel without having that visibility into the future is basically going to impede our ability to, give a fair chance to the school committee to really assess what needs to be done with Green Meadow and with Fowler and with the other schools in town. And just one more thing I would say, I'm nearby and I do use that field all the time. I like it. I think it's a nice green space. It's one of the few green spaces left. Kids practice there. My kids play soccer there. And I would really recommend a more thorough review of this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so next on my list, Jason Creel. That's you, Jason.
Yeah, it's just a matter of trying to get off mute.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
It's better than starting to talk to no one. A couple of questions. My name is Jason Creel. I'm on the currently chair of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. Held some other committees over the years. Justin, one thing that has come up in my time, I live right down the street from it also. I walk the dog through there every now and then. I know there's rock outcrop in part of the field, and after a heavy rain, water just sits on it. Over the years, there's been a number of times when, whether it was recreation or school or DPW, that we've looked at some kind of rehab on that field to make it, bring it up to a better standard. Do we currently have any of those costs, and have those costs been provided? And this is probably more of a finance committee question than it is a master planning question, but I know it was one of the questions that I saw was, but if you're looking at 70,000, what's the opportunity cost and the opportunity lost? I'd be curious as to, if the town were going to make that field, fully playable, do we have that number? And I don't need it now. I'm just curious.
So Jason, I can answer that question. And we can kind of go back to what we talked about how the DPW and the Rec Commission and the Superintendent's Office were working through the Fowler Field project. So Jim Hines is on with us, and some of you may or may not know the Fowler Field reconstruction project was a multi-allocation funding source of CPC, town funding through the select board, and giant volunteerism and raising funds through private means. That field reconstruction roughly cost those three parties $200,000. And that is for a renovation to get the field to look as it is right now. What's always missing, and what CPC cannot fund, and what sometimes our town budget struggles with, is the yearly operational expense associated with maintaining an athletic field to that standard. The DPW can provide mowing, trimming, irrigation services, but we do not have the staff that is fully capable of providing cultural services, which is fertilization and aeration processes, slice seeding, overseeding, etc., that comes with repetitive use and exposure to turf fields. Roughly our maintenance cost for Fowler, as we see fit right now through our consultants that built the field, is roughly $30,000 per year. The DPW's entire Repair and maintenance operational line is 40,000 a year, which has to cover all repair and maintenance of all parks within the community, all grounds at every public facility, the entire cemetery, tree maintenance, tree removal, etc. So the DPW and the town operating budget does not have the means to maintain the field appropriately. The three parties I've talked to are continually looking to find revenue sources, recurring revenue sources to support those operational expenses. As some of you, if this group has looked at any of the presentations that myself, Greg, and Beth have presented to the school board and the school committee and the select board, you may have heard me say that I believe allocation of some of the funding, if not all of the funding from the solar, can help subsidize what is the need for supporting operating costs to allow our fields, which would be a mitigation of the loss of Green Meadow, to allow the fields that are priority to be maintained properly.
Okay, thanks, Jason. John, I see you, but Denise Walsh, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, Denise Walsh, Recreation Commission as well. So one of my questions sort of piggybacks on Justin, exactly what you just said. And Jason, what you brought up is this this return, this $70,000 a year potential return. And who would have authority to assign those funds? You know, who do those funds belong to? How do we assign those funds, hopefully to be able to fund some of these projects, to maintain fields, build fields, do other things that we want to do with recreation, open space, things like that. I'm curious for that answer, if anyone sort of has that answer. Again, it's, you know, as recreation, yes, we would love to support solar, but we also, you know, our hearts are with the field and losing a field in whatever shape it's in. So understanding access to these funds to help sort of use these funds for other fields and be able to find other green space to use as fields, it's sort of, you know, sort of an internal struggle.
So I'll answer that because I provide my budget recommendation to the select board. So give a little more context. Although this was in presentations, but just to kind of cover it now, that's $70,000 rough. That's an estimate. Comes in three different forms. One is a lease payment because they're using town school property, so they pay us a lease. A second way is through a pilot agreement. That's a payment in lieu of taxes. So because there's value to those assets, right? It's a solar panel, so there's a tax to that, or payment in lieu of that tax, right? Which is something we do want to negotiate, and I kind of alluded to that in the emails. And then the third way, which isn't that much, but it came out to be maybe about $10,000, is actually through credits. So it's really just money that we're not spending on energy because we're getting the energy off of the roof or the field or the right. So it's not. So if someone wasn't getting any money, it wouldn't actually be $70,000 new. It would actually be maybe 60. So just kind of clarify, like that 10,000 is just credits that you're not spending on energy anymore. Okay, but that is $10,000 you're not spending on energy anymore, so you can use it else. So that those forms of revenue and credits, unless it's through another mechanism like a revolving fund, which I don't believe it can be at this time, it would just go to the general fund. It would be new revenue that would go to the general fund. And then where generally, this is just how new revenues are allocated and appropriated. So then it would be incorporated into the budget, and generally budgets are first recommended by the various departments. I consolidate them, and then I submit a recommended budget to the select board, who considers it, and then it's eventually submitted to town meeting for appropriation. So how could we say where that money comes from? Well, I get a request from the departments, and they say, we would like, and this comes out every year. Justin does ask for more money every year to his credit. He does ask for more money every year to maintain the fields better. Okay, so, and then somebody like me has to figure out, okay, well, we can't give everybody everything you want. And so, but if I had like another funding source, I might be able to earmark a certain amount more for its fields. And if in this sort of theory of where it could go to. And then that might be my recommendation to the select board, who would, or that request could come from the school committee, or it could come from the recreation commission. It could come from somebody that would say, we would like more money towards this, but I would be able to identify this new form of revenue that could then fund that. We don't get a lot of new revenue, and so it is a good sort of policy. It's a direct policy of like revenue from a field use, if you will, or facility use, that would then go fund other facilities. That's a good one for one.
And to that point, with so many needs in the town for using revenue, I'm not sure where fields would fall versus school and other quote unquote more important issues that the town has. So with that little revenue to be dispersed throughout the town, I'm not sure fields would be, number one on the list. And that's sort of where recreation sort of falls. And we've made requests and for budgetary funds and not really, had that much of a positive reaction to that. So, just wanted to understand a little bit more of the process.
I hear that. And the select board has heard that too, of course. So like if they direct me earlier in the fall, they give a budget message. And so, which I advise them on, but if they say, by the way, we would like a certain amount of money given towards fields this year, I'll try to make that happen. Okay, John Dwyer, even though I just said your name, reintroduce yourself and who you're with.
This is John Dwyer on the Community Preservation Committee and Conservation Commission. The CPC's issue would be to have some assurance that if a town gives up a field, that the existing fields are extremely well maintained, because the CPC has invested significant funds into those fields. From the conservation standpoint, I got a map today from Caitlin. It indicates there aren't major issues from a wetland standpoint on that field. However, the Conservation Commission would be very concerned about any tree cutting. And finally, Conservation Commission has oversight over stormwater, so I understand Justin's issue with the parking lots there. And that would have to be seriously looked at. And by the way, what's the percentage of parking lots actually going to be utilized for solar?
All right, so you have like 4 questions, John. So, but I believe we have addressed all of these during the course of the development of the RFP. So we'll do our best. I don't know if we could guess. I'm going to start with the last one first. Okay. Could we even guess what percentage? What percentage of? Do we have like a number, Justin or Beth, as to how much of the parking lots?
We weren't, so part of that vetting out process was the usability, the availability, the site specific for solar array, southern exposure. So there was a lot taken into it. John, I'm not sure if you saw the conceptual map of where the locations are, but if you're familiar, I would say roughly 80% of the student, I believe it's the teacher's parking lot at the high school adjacent to Maynard Crossing by the gymnasium would be covered by solar canopies. None of the senior parking, which is also the student parking at the high school, would be covered. And 50% of the visitors parking adjacent to the entrance up against the field would be covered by a canopy. And then at the Fowler School, you could roughly say that 50% of the areas would be covered by canopy systems. And those canopy systems were identified closer to the wetland. As you may have heard, the MSBA process was number one in everybody's mind throughout the criteria selection team. And the expansion of Fowler as an addition was highly weighed. And that area that was identified for canopies was in close proximity to the wetlands between Fowler and the high school. That's why it was identified as a usable spot, because the additions, if they were to come to fruition through the feasibility study, would be additions off of the wings of Fowler technically towards the south, the Federal Wildlife Reserve, or towards the Fowler soccer field, as you may have heard, or towards the Green Meadow area. So that's the canopies.
Okay, and then tree cut, yeah, I'm helping out. So tree cutting was not taken lightly. Like it was gone back and forth a number of times. My understanding was SunPower was one of the two vendors, but they were the finalists. They were very receptive and understood our concerns and our sensitivities to removing any trees. And they readjusted a lot of their design to compensate for our sensitivities. Although it is a sun, they need the sunlight, right? And so like if they're trying to maximize their field to maximize the amount of energy that they can get out of these solar projects, they identified that when push came to shove, there were some trees that they would have to either reduce or remove, but it came at a cost, which we presented to them, and I believe that they understood. And not only trees for the sake of trees, but also privacy, because as Justin just pointed out, which is on some of the diagrams, it does abut Maynard Crossing, and so we were trying to be cognizant of the neighbors as well, for what it's worth. But yeah, we try to minimize any sort of tree loss whatsoever. It's about Brett. Justin, you gonna add? Go ahead.
Yeah, I can add to that. John, I don't know if this group knows, but I'm also the tree warden. So that was taken, very seriously. Part of the areas that were identified on the RFP were areas that would minimize the loss of canopy and the loss of shade trees within those locations. And I actually want to give Dave Gavin a lot of credit as one of the pre-identified or original identified canopies up against the Maynard Crossing had some tree removal, and we were able to get the proposer to move it to minimize the loss of some trees there. This final awarded proposal had the least amount of canopy loss for maximization of 1, energy production, 2, economics for the community.
So you had 2 more points, John. So one was stormwater, but so stormwater is also definitely a consideration, and stormwater always is. Whenever we have the parking lots, we have the pavements and whatnot, and that's Justin's constant battle is for stormwater. So we're with especially with snow as well, with the snow runoff and the melting and whatnot. So my non-engineering policy degree background gave me a certain amount of satisfaction that they were also sensitive to that. The design from SunPower, as Justin would present these demands. And it was, the collection of rainwater, particularly off of solar panels, because now we're adding more service above. So yes, it does give a certain amount of protection to the vehicles and pedestrians, but it does collect water itself. And so that and Justin, I'm greatly watering down, no pun intended, this concept, but as the water would be collected, it would then be funneled through the structure itself to identified storm drains that were either pre-existing or would be installed. See, Justin, you want to add a little bit more? I know that's a big brush that stormwater was considered.
So Greg's given his best MS4. I know you guys don't know that, but it's a permit system that the town of Maynard is responsible through DEP to manage stormwater properly, to eliminate and reduce pollution into our natural waterways. John is probably very familiar with this as a conservation chair, but not everybody is. So with this, though, we have a permit and we have to apply that. So that's why you see the town of Maynard sweeping the streets or cleaning catch basins, reducing pollution that goes into the Aspet River. So most of our underground infrastructure that collects stormwater, sadly in Maynard, leads to the Aspet River. So when the proposals came, one of our biggest ad alternates, which is a procurement process, we asked all the proposals to manage stormwater in a means to eliminate or reduce impacts to the natural environment. The cantilever systems allowed for what is a funneling of a large array of surface water back into our design system. As you heard Bill Crenshaw say, that there is some designs that are large and encompass a larger area. Those areas aren't designed to handle stormwater as efficient as the cantilever system. Thus, pretty much take a box and adding a bunch of water and then all of a sudden creating waterfalls at those edges, which would interfere with the bus loop or pedestrian walkability underneath them. These systems are proprietary and designed to funnel internally and move the water accordingly, thus eliminating pollution, and from a safety aspect in the winter, not allowing large pooling of water, which would have to be de-iced at a larger cost. So we looked at exactly what Jason talked about, is opportunity cost afterwards. Sometimes the $70,000 could still add an operational cost to the town. We looked at reducing to eliminating as much operational need and cost for the designs as possible. It was something that the committee highly looked at.
Oh, yeah. Very good. Alana, I see. Well, John, did that touch them all?
Well, the secondary issues, I was just wondering how much permitting is going to be needed for this kind of project.
Good question.
I'm sorry, John, I missed that.
He wants to know what's the permit process for this project?
No, not the process, but how much is going to be involved.
Right. Right.
So John, they'll have, the process will have to go through Conscom. It's just not there yet because the designs aren't in place. There's very limited amount. So council determined based off of the zoning that there is little amount of planning board and no zoning determination as it is exempt. We have that from our legal counsel in a determination. So at this point, there will still be site inspection through the DPW in the town. There will be conservation requirements, and there will be some planning board, and I believe the building inspector as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, John. All right, so Alana, who are you?
Hi, I'm Alana Gustafson. I'm on the Maynard Finance Committee. Two questions. One is, I know that there's obviously infrastructure involved in these, but is it, and that the RRFP only talked about the school area of town, but we're now clearing a huge space for a new fire station right across the way. And would it be possible if we went back to them and said, no go on the field? Are there other places? And again, this would probably have to go back to town meeting or whatever, but, and there's maybe a geographical limitation because they're like, no, we don't want to like have to move the electricity from here to there, whatever. But would it be possible to put them in on other town-owned parking lots? So that's question one. And then my second question, Justin, you mentioned briefly that the field being dangerous, and I'm just wondering if you could just talk a little bit about like what that means. Are we talking like head injuries for kids, or like why would it be dangerous?
Yeah,
Thank you.
So I'll go from backwards. I'll take number two and then go back to number one. So when you're talking about public fields, we have liability issues, such as anything. You talk about pedestrian walkways, sidewalks, there's always a liability issue. So when you allow for permit use of a public athletic field, you hold certain liabilities. That field is not conducive for athletic sports based off of its compaction level. It's less than 50% utility grass, which means there's a large amount of bare spots. Natural turf fields have what is a potential cushioning. That's why natural turf fields are highly sought after for safety. Artificial fields are making leaps and bounds into the cushioning aspect. That's part of the reason why they don't get permitted. And to revitalize that field to a standard that is conducive to allow athletic sports to eliminate or reduce liability would come at the cost roughly similar to Fowler Field's reconstruction. There is a major grading operation. There would be a major amount of organic matter and sand that would have to be shipped in because the area there, thus behind the Green Meadow as well, is a large amount of ledged area. So there is a number of constraints on that use of the field. It doesn't mean it couldn't be. The community could invest a lot of money and have that field get to that. It would also need the removal of trees to match whatever the identified use is. If it was a soccer field or a football field, there would be removal of trees and there would be a larger cost. If it was a baseball diamond, there could be some reduction, but there would still be a large cost with infrastructure such as fencing. And then to go to number 1. So the entire town was reviewed. Unfortunately, as you all know, Maynard is extremely small in square mileage, and a third of it is federally reserved under the State Department. And the town of Maynard, under its public entity, owns a small amount of property when you look at it from a whole. So a lot of this was reviewed, and through conservation, and John can maybe jump in after too, just to confirm, Alana, there is a lot of the publicly owned land in Maynard already has what's called a conservation restriction, which is protected under Article 97. If we were to change those conservation restrictions through Article 97, we would need to do a swap of equal or greater value. Meaning if we allowed 1 acre on a conservation restriction of solar, we would need to either buy another acre or change use of that, of another municipal use to meet the conservation restriction. So like the golf course, I know there was some questions regarding the golf course. Well, the golf course is conservation restricted, and it's an Article 97 protection. So if you were to utilize the golf course as solar, we would have to replicate that large area with some other town land, which we don't necessarily have one that large to replicate. Now, I will address the facilities. So all of our current assets were identified. None of them met the criteria. So as you may or may not know, this lease agreement with the solar company is for 20 years. So the second that they put this solar on the roof, they have leasee rights. Now, our council and their council work through to make sure we're protected, and their council make sure they're protected. But if we put a 20-year lease on top of a roof that's already aged out, then there's the potential of a cost loss if we go to replace that roof and we need to have the solar removed. Sadly, we have not done a great job of funneling capital money towards roof repair. There is a number of roofs, if not almost all of the roofs within the community, are well beyond their expected life to handle a 20-year lease. The only roof left is technically the high school, which was also designed as a solar-ready roof. Through the original MSBA process for the high school, solar was identified to capture that 2% MSBA trigger. So it was LEED certified, was the approach that they went. And that structure was designed to handle the solar load, almost what you heard Beth say with the Lincoln. So if you have a solar project, you can design the building to handle it. Now, the town of Maynard did it the opposite way with the high school. And there is benefits that are transpiring potentially, but there is some constraints, as you heard Beth say. It's harder to build the building and then have the unknown. So one of the constraints in the identification of the high school roof was our assumption, as it was designed and built to handle a solar array. After a structural analysis, found out that the area and roof above the auditorium would not be able to hold the load of solar. So that was removed. So that's the con of potentially doing the solar after the fact. Now, when you talk about the firehouse and the new fire department, unfortunately, I was not here during that design, but that design was not inclusive for solar. So when I say the structural aspect has to be built to handle the load, it was never designed in that manner. Now, I will tell you that through the master planning committee and Jason and the entire community, that has been identified moving forward. This solar project does not necessarily mean that the community doesn't continue to address or chase after solar in the future. This project is inclusive to exactly what you see now.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Jason Creel, do you have another follow-up question? I think I saw your hand raised anymore. Denise, do you have another question? Nope, just lingering. All right, John, Jim, I see you, but I also see Jim. No, go ahead. And then we'll get Everose. I'll get you in a minute. Jim, go ahead.
Thanks, Greg. Jim Hines, also on the Recreation Commission. Just a few questions. I mean, and some of them have been answered. So, question about timing. In terms of the timing of this, you know, let's say that everything went to plan and the school committee approved this. When would the field be, you know, I guess taken, so to speak, for the solar panels? That's one question I have. I may have missed, again, I didn't have a chance to review all of the materials, so if I apologize if I'm asking a question that's already there. I know I know Justin, and I like the terminology, the juice, you know, the juice not being worth the squeeze, so to speak. It's a good movie. 70,000, if the field is taken out of this project, how far, you know, how much less is the money's coming in, if it's, or is it just a non-starter? It's like, if we don't have the field as part of this project, then the whole solar project doesn't happen. That's that's one question. And then I have a question which may be premature. In terms of the Green Meadow building project, and obviously, you know, I think that there may have been opportunities when the high school was built to maybe have some potentially better fields that didn't come to fruition. Is there thought process or some kind of proactivity in terms of, if we build a new field and build a new school, are there fields, green space, turf fields that could be in conjunction with that development of that new build, new school? I think those are all my questions.
I'm going to take a stab at one of, I'm trying to help out Justin by not having to talk the whole time. So I'll take a stab at the last one. I think we're probably too early to tell what the feasibility study might yield as far as like the potential for a new school or renovations to the current school or extensions onto an existing school. And then with that, how to execute that. So whether we're just, I think we're way too early to tell.
Can I ask a quick question on top of that?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Is there any concern about if the solar panels are put on the Green Meadow field? Like, for instance, the high school was built behind the high school, right? So, you know, when the high school was built, if we had solar panels behind the old high school, I don't know how much of an issue that would have been building a new high school, because you have all these solar panels that are leased, and now where do you put this, you know?
Yeah.
Is there any concern about the fact that there's potential that Green Meadow field could be the site of a new Green Meadow, and now you're limiting your flexibility of building a new school because you have these solar panels on it?
So that is a concern. So I know Justin's going to leap in, but that is a concern, and it has been addressed, as Justin said, like within even the development of the RFP. Like, we were thinking, and primarily Justin was thinking years ahead, if you will, like trying to think like where could the school be used, what could be potential land. And to your point, look at the backfield, right? It's right there. But as John Dwyer kind of alluded to, it's close to some wetlands, it's close to the preservation. We'd have to remove more trees. There's vernal pools that are relatively close by. There's potential for the same ledge that's under the current elementary school, and that would be a costly endeavor to be able to get that project to be built correctly at that existing, where the ledge is right now. So with that, it does make it difficult to say, like, we can't say for certain whether that field would be under consideration, because the feasibility study hasn't been done. But what I've heard, the reports that I've heard, and kind of like I just kind of listed a couple of them, it seems unlikely, but again, not sure, but it seems unlikely that field would be consideration for the potential new elementary school. But again, uncertain at this time because we haven't done the feasibility study. Okay, John, and then so Justin or Beth, can you speak to what the potential revenue impacts may be with the removal of that field? And I think I know the answer, but so Beth or Justin, do you want to?
Beth, I'll just do like a quick synopsis, and then if you can get into the details of how economics works, I think that would really benefit everybody. So
yeah,
one of the members of the school committee asked us to request a reduction in size of the Green Meadow Solar ground mount. And a 50% reduction equaled almost a 50% reduction in the revenue source. And then the potential loss of it, you know, Beth can give you her insight on how the entire process works and how the economics work. Go ahead, Beth.
Thanks, Justin. So the solar incentive program in Massachusetts, which has been ongoing in various forms for the past decade, is designed to provide incentives to projects to facilitate their success. This particular program, entitled the SMART program, is designed in a way that establishes a certain amount of solar capacity spread out over a series of what they call blocks. And as one block fills or one portion is full, it moves to the next block, and so on and so forth. And with each movement from block to block, there is a 4% reduction in the amount of incentives that are realized by the project. What happens with these kinds of projects under third-party ownership models is the owners of these assets work really hard to get a stacking of all of the maximum amount of incentives possible through various means. And then they distribute and share those incentives, some with the town, in different forms. And as Greg said, there's lease, there's tax, and there's the energy benefit. As the incentives get squeezed, the economic benefits back to the community are also squeezed. So as Justin mentioned, we did ask if we pared down the ground mounted array by 50%, what would the impact be on the overall economic opportunity for the town? And the answer is the overall project economics drops by 50%, just because of how the incentive programs work. So when there's a question of what's the harm in delaying, as I mentioned, we have this, this declining block program, and as it's getting full in Eversource territory, you're losing economic benefit with each decline in the block. So again, one of the other pieces I would just add is you design your systems and then you have to plug it in somewhere, and you're plugging it into the grid. And when you plug it into the grid, there's a cost that comes with that. What Eversource will do is they're going to look at all of this energy is coming back into our system, and can our system make sure that the lights stay on throughout the town, that it doesn't trigger everything off, right? And so it's a whole study that Eversource does. And then they require certain upgrades and protections and control. And from my experience, those are not inexpensive upgrades. We already know that this area has relatively high saturation. There's limited amount of capacity to bring in lots more renewable generation. So there will be some upgrades. The larger the scale of your project, the better you can accommodate some of those bigger costs. So even if we were to reduce the ground mount array or eliminate it, it may not eliminate the same proportional amount of costs for the utility interconnection, which could make the economics completely evaporate any economic benefit that the town would see.
Okay, and then the other question from Jim was, do we have a crystal ball, or how clear or not clear is that crystal ball as to when this field, this is totally scenario. If there is one scenario, if the field were to be used for a solar project, when might that come to fruition?
So that's a good question. And the best answer I can give you is certainly not this summer. The Eversource interconnection process, just by virtue of its tariff, is a 3 to 4 month process. And because there's different assets that Eversource is looking at as part of this overall project, they're really evaluating it as one very large project. And so that's going to take at least 3 to 4 months, if not longer. I would say, again, depending on as we get into the winter, I would expect SunPower would want to get the project fully entitled, all interconnection costs fully permitted with all of the appropriate, jurisdictional bodies, and be ready starting probably next early spring, if the weather holds out, to start looking at construction in the field. That would be my guess, earliest scenario. I would say.
There's also more to add to that, Jim. So then there's the internal statutory process that needs to take place, meaning the school committee needs to vote and take a motion to allow the select board to continue that process. Then during that process, we're negotiating what is multiple contracts. As Denise has mentioned, you know, the money comes in, but it comes in 3 pots, as Greg tried to explain, with a lease, a potential pilot or property tax, and AOC credits. And each one of those comes with a contract agreement between the 2 parties. And that is a lengthy amount of time that needs to happen. And a lot of that takes place unilaterally or in parallel with the process of SunPower and the utility. So, you know, our delays will cause delays over there and vice versa. So we're both kind of traveling down a path, and every delay on both paths will increase or potentially drop off the project.
Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks,
Thanks, Jim.
thanks, Beth.
Eva Rose, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, Eve Rose Schluter. I have been on various committees over the years, including the Coolidge Reuse Committee, but I guess it's not 100% relevant. But since some other citizens already spoke, I thought that I would be able to at least put my 2 cents in. First off, I'm not going to continue to talk necessarily about the recreational use of the field, but I am curious, and I really appreciate the discussion on the economics that Ms. Greenblatt just gave. But, being somewhat versed in the SMART program myself, both because I have solar panels on my roof and also through my work with the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, my understanding with the latest revisions or the emergency regulations that went into place with the SMART program this past, I think it was October, is that there was a real push to try and move away from ground mounted solar and to move more towards, putting solar on rooftops and existing infrastructure and so forth. And so I'm just curious how those recent regulatory changes affect the proposal, which was submitted prior to those regulatory changes, I believe. And also in terms of the economics, if you could highlight what the revenue generation is for the company versus what the town is receiving. Because I think $70,000 a year, while it seems like, I don't know, for some people, a lot of money, it's not a lot given for what we potentially are giving up with the ground mounted solar array. So thank you for allowing me to ask those questions.
Beth, I'm looking to you.
So 2 things. One, it's always delightful to have someone who has some knowledge of the SMART program, because it's anything but smart, right? It's a complicated program. So the emergency regulations were being fully adjudicated in a very large stakeholder open process over the course of a year at minimum. While the regulations were going through their internal approval process, it was pretty clear to the industry what the ultimate outcome would be. Notwithstanding, when the final regs came out, there were some minor modifications. What the Department of Energy Resources did do as part of the emergency regulations is they threw more money at the types of projects they wanted to see more activity occur. They threw more money at behind the meter installations. They threw more money at a variety of different things. What they didn't do, they did not prohibit ground mount, but they restricted ground mounts in areas of specific agricultural areas and areas of specific, so forest land. And they created more challenges. They penalized some ground mounted installations based on their existing condition, whether they had been already disturbed, similar to what this particular field is. So they're certainly, and as you look at the projects that are being built, the projects that have the greatest degree of incentives are the carports. For a variety of reasons. One, they're a policy priority, but more importantly, they are significantly more expensive to build. Carports are, and this gets to your second question, but carports are really a ground-mounted structure on steroids. They are physical structures made of significant amounts of steel. So they're expensive. Doing a small-scale ground mount is never really cost-effective. Getting to the larger scale like we have and combining it in an overall portfolio of lower cost roof installations and honestly lower cost ground installations helps subsidize the cost of those carports. So again, the incentives are designed to encourage certain things for policy reasons, but also to recognize there's additional cost in certain kinds of installations. And that's primarily what the emergency regulations did, in addition to providing a boost to public sector projects. So there was a variety of different things it did, all worked to our favor, but they were issues that we already knew when we went out to bid. We were fully aware of what was anticipated. And when we got through the ultimate final process, we were very clear with SunPower to understand how they incorporated those changes. As for the revenue streams they're really getting revenue streams in a couple of different ways. They're getting revenue from the sale of that electricity. The town gets to keep some of the credit benefit and the rest of it goes to SunPower. They're also getting revenue from the SMART program. As part of the SMART program revenue, it gets shared between the town and SunPower. SunPower, in the case of these projects, is designing, building, owning, operating, maintaining, decommissioning, fully responsible for this asset on town property, ensuring all of that. They have full responsibility. It's a pay for performance contract. If the assets don't operate, they don't get paid. They don't get SMART revenues and they don't get any revenue from the town. And yet they're still on the hook to pay taxes and lease. So the town really worked hard to structure a deal that maximized the economic benefits. What's the final return to SunPower? It's a great question. I couldn't give you the answer. I don't know. They're a private company. They don't disclose that information. My experience in this industry, if I were to give you a ballpark of the kinds of returns solar companies are dealing with as they're looking at these type of projects, I think it's very project specific, very specific to the investor who loans them money, but it's anywhere from a low of like a 6-7% return to somewhere in the like 6 to 8% returns is kind of what they're getting. They are financing it. They're financing in a variety of different ways, but this is a 20-year asset that they're owning, they're operating, they're insuring, they're maintaining, and ultimately they will be decommissioning it and taking it off. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that thorough explanation. I guess I'm just, if I were to sort of think about, and I know it's a different and slightly different incentive program for when it's your homeowner versus more commercial. But, the economics just didn't make sense to lease versus to buy, at our residence, because, somebody else would be generating and getting all the revenue. And so, we ended up purchasing, but I guess I'm just curious, and I do believe that the town negotiated in good faith here, but I'm just curious as to the percentage, if you were to look at the revenue that the town's getting versus the overall revenue from the project, because $70,000 does not seem like a lot to me for the amount of, the size of the array that's going in, just knowing sort of my own size of array and what I make in a year on my solar panels. So when I scale that up, it just doesn't seem like to match. So, and I get that there's nuances. I just am concerned that we're being a little short-sighted in terms of what the revenue is going to be for this type of project by giving up, some of our green space. And my added comment is I'm very frustrated to hear that the fire station was not designed to be solar ready. That to me, if that's the case, is a gross oversight and a complete a complete lost opportunity. So I guess I'll just stop there. I don't need to keep people on, but I appreciate the discussion and the feedback. Thank you.
Greg, if I could just, one of the other additional things that impacts the economics, and Justin referenced it earlier, is the addition of guttering structures to be able to help redirect stormwater. Again, you're not going to have more water on surfaces. It's just more consolidated water in different areas as it's coming off of the modules. And so the town felt it was very important to investigate, even though it came at a higher cost, which means lower returns to the town, the systems to be put in place as part of the carport structures to make sure that there was a very strong way to manage that stormwater, and also integrated lighting as part of it underneath the canopies. Some of those design elements, while they seem pretty obvious and simplistic, are expensive. And so, could we improve the economics of the project by eliminating those? The answer is yes. Is it desirable? Justin did some due diligence with colleagues around the Commonwealth about how they deal with the stormwater issue. And quite frankly, I think he took a very professional approach at saying, here, we want to make sure we can control it better. So.
Rose, I can also speak. You said you work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
No, I work for the State Division of Fisheries and Wildlife.
Okay, so you may or may not be familiar with the procurement process.
I am.
So it's not necessarily a negotiation.
Yeah,
It's
I
an
hear
approach
you.
and a procurement. So just for those who are not, so sometimes in a private world, just like Everose is talking about, it's you and a developer wants to put a solar on your roof. Unfortunately, our RFP is a request for proposals, but we're at the mercy of those proposals within that criteria structure. So I will tell you, Everose, that both the finalists had very similar economics. So we did look at that, but it wasn't grossly off balance. And unfortunately, public procurement meant to reduce fraud sometimes eliminates extras or financial gain for communities. And that sometimes is a bigger trigger than people want to realize. But we are statutorily required to do that. So if we said right now as a community that we don't like 70,000, we don't like this concept, let's go back out to RFP, that doesn't mean anything's going to change. It doesn't guarantee it at all.
I fully can understand and appreciate that, having to go through it a lot myself at work. But the town also doesn't need to accept any of the bids.
Correct.
So just
totally.
pointing that out.
Absolutely. I just want to make it clear that this project is that, and that's the decision. That should be the decision.
It was Eve Rose, right? Cool name.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
No,
I go by Eve. People can call me Eve.
There you go. Thank you. It's a cool name. All right, Denise, back to you. I see your hand raised. Go ahead.
Great. Real quick, back to process. So it was either Justin or Greg, you mentioned the process of having the school committee need to approve this. As part of their approval process, they are looking for statements from each of these committees.
Right.
Do they have to get these statements in order to proceed to the vote? Or is this just sort of, we'd like to have your support? And also in sort of connected to that, the time frame, you mentioned wanting these statements by Friday, which doesn't give each committee time to meet with their committees in order to discuss this and what the committee as a whole would like to support, or what they want that statement to be. So if you can talk about the what's needed from these statements, if they're necessary to move forward to voting, and then sort of the timing of needing the statement versus being able to meet in our groups.
Okay, no, absolutely. So I can't interpret the school committee. They can't, this is not a posted meeting, so they can't deliberate right now to answer that first question. Like what, to your point, is it a like to have, or are these required questions to be answered? I can't interpret that. Like I have the document that I got from the superintendent's office on behalf of the school committee, and I provided that. So I don't know. But the second question is the timeline for the statements. So I don't know when this will be deliberated by the school committee. I just asked the superintendent's office when it may be on a schedule of the school committee. He said the next regular schedule of school committee is Thursday, May 6th. And I said, so when might you need any statements to inform whatever deliberation that might happen? And he said Friday, this Friday, in order to, you know, as he creates his packaging, I suppose, like I do this for the select board. Like I create like a package of materials that are provided to the public and primarily the select board for their deliberation. So I had to get a schedule in there. There was a lot of meetings in the last 2 nights, and Wednesday night seemed to be the most opportune time to have a big meeting like this. So that, like, it wasn't that much more, you know, strategy involved. It was just trying to make it all fit. And so we're having this meeting right now. By Friday, I will report that I had this meeting. I will report this to the superintendents. I had this meeting. I provided the documentation as I had them. I provided the statements as requested by the school committee. If any statements are provided to me by the committees, again, I understand, like, how are you going to post a meeting in the next 48 hours? I'm not saying you have to. I'm just saying that I'm trying to facilitate that. Or next week, right? If you meet next week or even the week after, at whatever time you want to get your statements to the school committee, then that's when you get your statements to the school committee. Like I don't dictate, besides tonight, I don't dictate when the various committees and boards meet. I just am trying to inform that and facilitate when the school committee may deliberate this process. I know this is clear as mud, and I apologize.
Yeah,
This is not
no,
how I like doing this.
No, I understand that. I'm wondering, was anyone from the school committee who's on this call?
But if they, I just want to caution, this is not a publicly posted meeting by the school committee. So they can say their individual. So if they, all right, so if they can't say, oh, the school committee decided, they can say what the school committee already deliberated, kind of like a reporter in the minutes, but they can't say, oh, right now we're going to decide this is actually what we want now. Does that kind of make any sense? I'm sorry for like.
Really, I mean, we need to know.
Denise.
Yep.
What Greg is saying is true. None of the committees on here at this point is doing anything other than gathering information. So the FinCom can't say something, select board, school committee, none of them can say anything. We're just here gathering information.
Well, you can. So any of the committees that were posted can deliberate and make a motion. It's even listed in the agenda. But that's not my expectation. I'm sorry for being more confusing. But I listed it to try to facilitate the questions. And so if any of the bodies give me a statement that represents the body by the committees, then I will forward that to the superintendent's office. Or you can just go around me, cut out the middleman, Greg Johnson, and just give it to the superintendent's office.
Well, I guess just as a practical matter, I can only speak for the FinCom, but we came here to gather information, and some of our members are not here, and so we would not deliberate. I feel fairly confident that the select board would make the same decision as would any committee. You know, there's only a limited number of members here, so.
Fair. Okay, Lindy, who are you?
So hi, everyone. I'm a member of the CPC. And I used to be a rec committee member in another town. And so my question has more to do with the rec side of things. In that town, we did not have a lot of green space either. But when we made decisions about moving forward on projects, we took into account not just structured recreational uses, but unstructured play and the need for wild open spaces. And this is one of those few places. I live on the other side of town, but I walk our dog there every day. And, I have to say, I always see kids playing, adults out, looking at the wildlife, taking photos, and it's sort of like the Visa commercial. How do you put a price on that? It's priceless. And once you lease that for 20 years, I hope that we're seriously thinking about how would we ever replace that? Using 2019 figures for the Coolidge area, we know that 2 acres is worth $3 million. And so do we have that to buy more open space if we ever needed it? And so I would just like that to be taken into account. Having said that, you know, I can tell that the team that did the RFP, Justin, you and your folks have done an amazing job. You've looked at every angle. So this isn't directed at you or the team or the people on the project. It's more of a town question, you know, that should be driving our efforts. Because when I look at our master plan, I counted close to 20 references about valuing green and open space. And yes, you know, I facilitated one of the Paris Climate Accord things going into it. So I'm a huge advocate of solar, but even though that's mentioned, I feel like these trade-offs are just so tough. So that's more of a statement about future decisions, because you don't want people going down a path and putting in a lot of work if it might not but be what we really want long-term due to trade-offs. So then the other question I had is at town meeting, the way this was presented, I thought I was voting for solar panels on the roof, and I thought that I was voting for solar panels over the parking lot. I can't speak for others, but I can't think that I'm the only one who thought I was voting that way. So how would we explain this to citizens so that they didn't feel like the rug was pulled out from under their vote, that was not their intent? And maybe that's a rhetorical question, but those are the only two things I was thinking about, because everything else has been so well laid out in terms of the research and everything.
I'll try to kind of give my 2 cents on that, Lindy. So I advise the select board, and then based on all this good discussions that's been coming this evening and past, which a lot of members of the select board are present for this evening as well, but it's definitely loud and clear that they don't want to compromise the future or an opportunity lost or green space. To your point, like, it's different from monetary value. Like there's value that needs to be looked at, you know, to the whole community. And I think that point is heard. So I think that they are receptive, and I think they want to be receptive. And I also believe that the members of the select board and school committee and all the other committees, I don't believe any committee in this town, I believe all of the committees in this town want community input. I believe that they make deliberations and decisions based on what they think is best according to the information they have and the feelings that they have from the community. And prior to the master plan is a good guiding document that sort of defines those feelings in a way. But even before that, I would assume that was how the decisions were made. So thank you, Lindy. That's a good point. But I don't think what you're saying is I don't think what you're saying is in any way inconsistent with the select board or school committee or rec commission or conservation commission. I believe that's what they all are looking to do.
Thanks, Greg. And I did want to say thank you to the school committee too, because I can't attend all of the meetings. So this is how it first came on my radar screen. And I think, while it can be easy to like go back and forth and say, oh, you're slowing up the process. No, you know, there's a miscommunication. I do think that the school committee has really been trying to bring forward the viewpoints of the citizens who've been at their meetings. So I think we need to take that into account when they're speaking, because a lot of people go to those meetings. So thank you to all of you, and that's it for me.
Okay, I'm kind of looking at my Brady Bunch screen, and I can only see about half of the 43 people. So any other questions? Wow. All right. This is on one of the few occasions when we wrap up within 2 hours for a night meeting, and I appreciate that. Oh, Mr. Green. All right. I spoke too soon. Go ahead.
I just want to know, so from here on out, how do we make sure, as a town and the town people, and I think we've heard that the field is not something the town people want as majority that are not on committees here. What's the best way to get that across to committees to not move forward with the Green Meadow Field? What are committees looking for to make sure that it doesn't, what would be the stipulation to make sure that the Green Meadow Field is not used?
Well, you can provide your input to any publicly posted meeting. I mean, if that committee so chooses to have public comments, which I don't think there's any committee that doesn't welcome. As I said earlier, I think all the committees welcome public comments. So whether it's on the agenda anyways, I think you can always give your input. So I recommend you pay attention to the town website so you can see when the publicly posted meetings are, and a lot of them.
I guess I'm not talking as like an individual, like, is it like a petition? If, say 500 people in town say, I just want to, I think it's pretty obvious here the town doesn't want it. And like, so what would be like as the non-starter, to make sure that moving forward in the finance committee and the school committee would say like, all right, we're taking Green Meadow off the table. And then to make sure that goes on into the next, the next deliberations.
So just speaking as one committee, if I may say, there's 40 some odd people. There are 40 some odd people in this meeting this evening. And one might assume that the dozen or so opinions and perspectives that have been offered up, reflect those dozen or so people. And so I think what Greg said is true. If you all feel strongly about something, then communicate that to the committees. As Greg said, on the town website, the committees have their meetings posted. I can speak for the finance committee. We're meeting to discuss this next Monday evening at 7 o'clock, and there's a Zoom meeting. I'm assuming that other committees will do likewise. All the meetings have to be posted on the town website. So you go to the town website, look on the right, and they're all listed there.
And that's a better way of doing it, is individually rather than like petition and getting 500, 1,000 people in town to say.
If you all want to put a petition together, that is a legitimate and equally effective way of getting that across. You have to understand that all the committees represent the 10,000 plus people within the town, and so we're taking perspectives from people who want to see town revenues go up, as well as people who say we don't want to lose the Green Meadow Field. Okay, so I'm speaking more generally to anybody who's on this call or who may view the recording, that whether it's individual communications or petitions, equally valid ways of putting forward a perspective or opinion.
Yeah, Jack, I see you, but 2 seconds. So just as a
thank you, Ken.
Real quick, 2 seconds. Everybody has seen panels on a roof. Everybody has seen panels on a field. At some point, if you're interested in looking at what the parking lot kinds of canopies would look like, drive over to Lincoln Sudbury High or down to the Wayland Town Building, which have done this, and you'll get an understanding of what they look like.
All right, thanks, Jack. So I was going to say that if you petition, there's a legal definition of petition. So if you just get 500 people to sign something and then submit it to a committee, that's nothing really much more than a correspondence. But if you do an actual citizens petition, which is a true legal term in Massachusetts Commonwealth government, then which is in the charter and the bylaws gives you that, and you can find it on the website. You can contact my office, you can contact the town clerk's office, and we'll walk you through it. So I just want to clarify that there is sort of deliberate ways to do it, but I definitely back up Ken's. I usually recommend go through the standard policy development, which includes going through committees. So if you go through the committees and you get this is just my advice. As any petitioner ever approaches me, I always say, start at the committees. But you don't have
And
to.
those are school committee?
School committee, the people on this agenda. I mean,
Okay.
We've heard from Recreation Commission, School Committee, Select Board, Conservation, CPC. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Cool. Good. Anyone else?
Greg,
All
is
right,
you had sent out some information last week, and some of the attachments still referenced Crow Field and some things that clearly are not part of what the proposal is. Maybe I missed it. I apologize if I did. Is there something either just on the website we can go look at with the proposals, or is that?
No, I'm not sure I understand, Jason. What's your question?
Where can I find what the actual proposal is right now?
Oh, what we got from SunPower.
Yeah.
Oh, so I tried that too, but as I was quickly informed by Justin and Beth, that's a massive document. So we were using a Dropbox account to be able to look at all the, so ourselves and the evaluation team, it's a huge document. So, and I apologize with all the emails, I never got a clear answer from Beth or Justin. Is there a possibility that we can upload that massive document somewhere for the public to see?
Oh, so there's a PowerPoint presentation that Justin put out, which I thought was very informative, along with the presentations at the school committee and at the select board meetings. And so, I would say, just in the interest of understanding, if you go to, that would be probably a better thing to arm the citizens with, is the presentation that Justin put on there, because it shows what the proposal is.
Okay, yeah, Ken, thank you, Ken. That's more of what I think
Good.
we were looking
Okay.
for.
Okay, thanks, Jason.
So I guess what I would say is perhaps on the town website, I can forward the links because I forwarded them to my fellow FinCom members, but there's the, select board meetings and the school committee meetings. And then, there were the documents, and that could be posted on the, homepage, the Town of Maynard homepage.
Oh, that's a good suggestion. I understand. You're right, but I did make citations and links to all those past meetings. I wasn't trying to recreate everything. But you make a good point, just sort of alluding to it. So Jason, if you look at that email, then you'll see links to where you can get all that.
Yeah, I saw links to full meetings, and I apologize, but a lot of my members had 4 meetings this week.
No.
And then we're asked to put something together at really the last minute.
Yeah.
Which was very frustrating to some of the members.
I understand. Thank you, Jason. I do see Hillary Griffiths. Well, can you introduce yourself and what committee you're with and what your question is?
I'm not on a committee. I just have a quick question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I understand that getting rid of the field, Green Meadow Field, would make the scope of the project not financially feasible for the company to work with us. But I hadn't heard before that the carports were so expensive. By any chance, would removing the carports from the project make the high school roof a doable project by itself?
So remove the field, remove the carports, and just have the high school roof. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. Okay.
Yeah, that's my question.
So I think we would have to go back to the drawing board for the RFP, because that's not what they proposed. So
I'm just wondering, in theory, would that make it more feasible? If you remove the more expensive cost of the carports, could you remove some of the financial gain of the field and still have a feasible project?
That's kind of, Beth, maybe you can answer, but I would assume that's pretty hard to determine at this point, because those potential vendors proposed according to the scope that we allowed them to use, which included those parcels that were identified in the article. So at this time, I don't know if we could say, Beth, you're looking, maybe you can answer, but like, I don't know if we could say for certain whether we would have even gotten proposals, because it may not have been worth the economics of just doing the high school. But all right, but Beth, please correct me.
So I think everybody knows when you go to refinance your house or you go to finance something, even when the town tries to refinance its debt, there's costs associated, those transaction, all of those costs associated with those kinds of activities. So if the project was sized specifically just for the roof, more likely than not, Greg is right, you would not have gotten any proposals for third-party ownership of that asset, which is not to say there are not other ways potentially of getting it done, possibly, but not through the procurement, as Greg mentioned. Part of it is, it's just the transaction costs are too high for a small isolated asset like that. And so when I work with my clients who are looking to do a very discrete small project, my response to them is, you need to step back. You're trying to get the investment community to look at a project that's feasible and something they're willing to loan money for. Unfortunately, we see these as green projects, but we are a capitalistic society, and they are investors looking, to make a fair return on a reasonable project, and the transaction costs are significant. And so a company, if you had only done the roof, a large company like SunPower, I would guess would not have bid on that project. In fact, there were other companies that did not bid on the projects because they weren't, even with the parcels that we had identified, wasn't sufficient size for them to be able to put together a portfolio that would result in something they could finance.
Thank you.
I can add a little bit of context to that too, Hillary. So at that point, for the community, we'd be making a decision of the community investing in the capital asset in ownership of solar. And the finances within the town would have to look at that through their capital improvement program or their capital investment program. And at the same time, as you may or may not know, there is a large number of capital improvements that are not being taken care of, as we have a limited budget to begin with. So then you'd be contending with solar versus new roadways, solar versus a firehouse, solar versus other things, as our natural financial structure within Maynard typically has a track record of. So just kind of keep that in mind. That's why the approach was for a third party to own this asset, as the town of Maynard does not necessarily have the funding source to fund a capital ownership investment of a solar project of this magnitude.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for everyone's time. Not too bad. 9:05, folks. I really appreciate everyone's civility and patience and respect, and patience for me and patience for the team. Thank you so much for waiting your turn and asking good questions. Thank you. And as I said, my hope is to be able to tell the superintendent's office that this occurred. And if the various committees wish to provide a statement to myself or the superintendent's office to be forwarded to the school committee, we will do so. So thank you for your time this evening. Hope everyone has a good night.
Thanks, Greg.
Bye, guys.